Very good afternoon and a warm welcome and warm greetings to the Honorable Secretary and committee members of IIA, the Architects Diary members and readers, our honorable panelists of today's webinar, and all the viewers who have joined us today. I am Architect Kamalaja Tambuli, editor of the Architects Diary, and I welcome you on behalf of my entire team and the IIA. I thank you for dedicating your time from your busy schedules and joining us today for this initiative. So, founded and managed by a team of architects themselves, the Architects Diary has become one of the most visited architecture websites in India and is committed to featuring the best of architecture and interior design projects. Established in 2016, we envisioned the Indian creative community in a digital space, which was then abundant and unexplored. Thanks to the 55,000 plus architects and designers who believed in us and chose us for their project publication, we now have a monthly digital footprint of 250 million plus on our effortfully built website and social media platforms, with more than 15,000 people visiting our site daily. We, as a media house, consider ourselves as the important pillars of the nation, working tirelessly every day to uplift the design community and showcase the best of curated Indian works to the global audience. We aspire to bring in the highest change in this vast sea of knowledge and information, and we humbly wish for you to be a part of this change with the Architects Diary. So I welcome you to the second edition of TADialogue Series 2023. It's a monthly webinar series conducted by the Architects Diary, inclusive of panel discussions, interviews, presentations, and talk series by renowned architects, interior designers, architectural photographers, and influential people from all walks of the design and technology field. Based on meticulously curated trending themes in each session, the invited speakers too are carefully chosen by TAD's very own editorial team based on their knowledge and expertise in the particular topic. We believe in the power of dialogue. Getting the right answers from the right people is what the TADialogue series is all about. The Architects Diary's exclusive members tribe consisting of 1,000 plus firms with a viewer count of 100 plus audience in each session definitely go home with extraordinary takeaways and information add-ons. Our enthusiastic editorial team is always on the lookout for trending, innovative, and inspiring, design-relevant and stimulating topics that direly need to be addressed and shared with our ever-curious community. Conducting the series is helping us create a unique go-to library for the design fraternity where every question is answered. And with this initiative, it's our vision to create a universal yet distinctive information source beneficial for one and all. So also I'm very pleased to inform you all that today's webinar is being conducted in association with Indian Institute of Architects, that is IIA, a forum that we as architects have definitely always looked up to. It's an absolute honor for all of us to have this opportunity. IIA, the national body of Indian architects, was established in 1917 that today has more than 25,000 members and plays a major role in promoting the profession of architecture by organizing and uniting the architects of India to promote aesthetic, scientific, and practical efficiency of the profession both in practice and in education. IIA is represented on various national and international committees connected with architecture, art, and the building industry, and is also actively associated with International Union of Architects, the Architects Regional Council Asia, and South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation of Architects. I would personally like to thank Architect Amrish Mandlik Sir, Secretary of IIA, and Architect Chinmay Shah Sir, Treasurer of IIA, both Amdavad chapter, for making this possible. So I recall my mother's face only from the photographs I saw of her. Did she really set me up for this journey, or was it a natural course of life? On 24th of January 2023, India lost an architectural icon. Balkrishnavithaldasdoshi, the first and only Pritzker awardee of India, was a pioneer in shaping the post-independence architecture of this great nation. In honor of our beloved and revered Padmabhushan, Padmavibhushan, and Padmashri, bvdoshi sir, we have organized a tributary webinar under the monthly TADialogue series on today, that is 24th of February, the date that marks 1 month to the legend's demise. So I would like to initiate the event with a small yet very inspiring video clip. So yeah.
Architecture is storytelling. It's a journey. It's a dialogue. And it is a discovery of who you really are. I was in primaries. I had to write an essay. What would you like to do in your life? Not knowing anything, I said, can I make some furniture which is the cheapest possible, so that every house will have something to sit on and something to sleep on? I still have to fulfill that promise. Silence.
I hope you were all able to view the video. Yeah, just a sec. So I'll quote, "My grandfather never ceases to surprise me. In every interview he gives, the minute you think you know that what his answer will be, he'll say something completely different. And yet the meaning and his underlying concerns remain the same. It constantly reminds me that there is so much to learn. We might think we know, but in reality, we know nothing. As a constant reminder to stay grounded, reinvent, and work hard, he often recalls Corbusier's quip from a conversation they once had. Every morning, I am born in the skin of a donkey. The stories he tells us never end. They twist and they turn and take us on a beautiful and meaningful journey, filled with laughter and lessons for life. He's my constant inspiration, my guru, my guiding light, my friend, my confidant, and my dada. Recalls Khushnu, bvdoshi sir's dear granddaughter. It's a very wonderful and very emotional thing, I think. So bvdoshi sir was born on 26th of August, 1927 in Pune, Maharashtra, into a family headed by his grandfather, a furniture maker with his own workshop. One cannot just be an architect. The idea is to become a sthapati, he used to say. Sthapati from Sanskrit translates to an architect who makes the architecture, that is sthapatya. All the rules, laws, and materials are useless unless the architect combines them, molds them, and reshapes them in a way that a new creation emerges. Such was the philosophy preached and practiced by the man who lived architecture. Although, having closely worked with and influenced by the style of the renowned French architect Corbusier, Doshi's Indian works quite evidently were deeply rooted in the culture and psyche of the Indian people. He stood out with his idiosyncratic, that is, peculiar or individualistic architectural style in post independent India and inspired generations of architects with his signature Doshi designs. He believed that architecture was synonymous with life, a vehicle for constant celebration, a medium for heightened experiences, and his greatest contribution to the architectural community was his powerful words of wisdom that echo the timelessness of his structures. Architecture is an extension of life. It's creating a spiritual experience. With Sangath, he created a journey of discovery, a journey of all the things that inspired him as an architect, a philosopher, an artist, with the execution of his beliefs and his teachings of self sustainable, climate responsive design. This architecture office was with a distinct design, is an amalgamation of the professional community and social community of India. Sangath means moving together as a community and as a nation. Today, we are all gathered here to pay homage to the legendary bvdoshi by remembering his works, reminiscing the experiences we had with him, and the immense effect he had on our lives with his presence, his words, reflecting on his teachings and values with an attempt at carrying his legacy forward. And we are very fortunate to have five unique people on board with us today who have closely worked with Doshi sir in their careers and will be sharing their stories and personal experiences of him. The world knows B.V. Doshi as an architect, but with today's initiative, we want the entire community of his ardent followers like us to get to know the lesser known side of his persona, a philosopher, a thinker, a guru, a creator, a change maker, an artist, and so much more. I would like to introduce and welcome our first and most experienced panelist for today's discussion. He'll be joining us a bit later today, architect Rajeev Kathpalia, sir, partner and trustee at Vastushilpa Sangath, LLP. Architect Rajeev, an academician, was one of the closest people to B.V. Doshi, sir, his student, his colleague, his confidant. And honestly, when we received Rajeev sir's confirmation, we felt extremely elated that he was able to make it to the event, even in his quite hectic work schedule. So I really hope he's able to make it, and I'm really counting on it. And sir, if you've joined or if you will, we are extremely grateful for that. And next, I would like to welcome architect Vijay Patel, sir. He's the design director at Sangath, and he's been associated with Vastushilpa Sangath and B.V. Doshi sir since more than a decade. And I'm glad to share that Vijay sir was also the senior of our founder, architect Satbhai sir. So thank you so much, Vijay sir, for joining us today. And yeah, so next I would like to welcome architect Chinmay Satbhai from Pune, Maharashtra, an academician and the founding partner at SAC, the SAC Architects and Planners, currently pursuing his doctoral studies from NIT Raipur. So Chinmay worked at Sangath for around 3 years in his initial days of his career. I welcome you, Chinmay, and glad you have joined us. Next, I would like to welcome architect Mansi Pandey Shah, again an academician and program specialist and research scholar at New Jersey Department of Transportation in Georgia Institute of Technology, joining us all the way from the United States at, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. And Mansi has had worked at Sangath for 4 years while also teaching at Dept. I humbly welcome you too, Mansi, and glad you have joined us. And yeah, so this would be the first time I think that, Rajeev sir, Vijay sir, architect Chinmay, architect Mansi, they've collaborated with the initiative of the Architects Diary, and we hope this is the first one of many events, and our association continues. And last but not the least, I would like to welcome the moderator of today's panel discussion, architect Aman Sohal, founder of Forum Advaita from Mohali, Punjab. Aman has been associated with the Architects Diary for many years now, and I was actually extremely elated to see his enthusiasm with which he took up the moderation of this event. And so, thank you, and thank you for joining us today, and I welcome you. And I think it's an interesting mix of intellectuals we have today. And I would again like to say how grateful I am that how like all of you have joined today with your schedules and with your works. And so now I would like to hand over the panel to Aman to take over and initiate the panel discussion further.
Thank you, Kamalaja. I hope I am audible to everyone properly.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. So first of all, Kamalaja, I would like to thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I also want to congratulate you and the Architects Diary for taking this wonderful initiative. I think this was the need of the hour, and a panel discussion like this, which reaches out to as many architects and students of architecture. So I cannot explain what immense pleasure it gives me to be able to be on this platform amongst such amazing architects who have worked so closely with Doshi sir, and to be able to listen the stories and their experiences of working with Doshi sir. So this almost, takes me back 12 years ago when I was a part of Sangath along with Chinmay and Mansi. Unfortunately, myself and Vijay ji did not have an overlap of the time. And I was fortunate to have a word with him this morning. I also received a message just now from Rajeev sir, and he is saying that he'll be trying to make it to the event as early as possible.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so I really don't know how to begin this with, because the learnings from Doshi sir to us, to myself, has come through diverse mediums, through conversations with Doshi sir, through going to his buildings and trying to understand his buildings and his spatial experiences, through the book on Doshi sir, through the film on Doshi sir, and so many quotations and quotes by Doshi sir that is now making so much of a relevance to me in my life and my architectural practice. So what I thought I will choose to do is that I will begin by sharing one quote of Doshi sir that is stuck right in front of me on my wall in my office, in my cabin. So that quote goes like that: always remember there is somebody who is standing behind you, who is better than you, and you are answerable to him. Initially, when I heard about this quote, because of my immaturity as a student of architecture, I thought it evokes comparison. But only of late, I understood that this quote is nothing but questioning your own beliefs. And it is all about continuous evolution of yourself, your being as an architect. So this is something I thought I will share with all of you. Now, to begin with, I think it will be very wise that I begin with the architect Vijay. Mr. Vijay, I think it will be great to know your association with Sangath, your association with Doshi sir. How did it all start? And how has this evolution and association been so far? So please share your stories with us.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Architects Diary, for organizing this. I'll share my experience with Sangath and with Doshi sir. So maybe when I came to Amdavad in early 2012, well, I did my master's in urban design from Dept, and I passed out in 2009. And Rajeev Kathpalia was my thesis guide also. So I visited Sangath before from School of Architecture when I was doing a Bachelor of Architecture from SVIT Vasat, that is during 2000 to 2005. 2 times visited Sangath during that phase. So it was, and then 5 to 7, I was working out, and 7 to 9 when I was doing a master's. That time, again, since Mr. Rajeev Kathpalia was my guide, I used to come to a Sangath. So there was always a keenness to say, because every time you come to a Sangath, it excites you to do something, because it never gives you an impression that you are entering into an office building. So it is always exciting that what is this building is all about. And I was very much excited to work for these organizations from the day one when I did my master's. And somehow, because of other priorities, I went out. And in 2011 end or 2012 early, I spoke to one day Rajeev sir that I want to come back to Ahmedabad, and if there is an opportunity to work with Sangath, I would like to actually be a part of Sangath. He said, sure, come. And he just accepted that invitation, and then he asked me to join. And then that is the time that the journey started. And when we were working together, obviously Doshi sir was at that time very much active, and he was working on a project. I think Mansi was working with him at that time on a Teen Darwaza project. But what our experience is with him is that the kind of curiosity he had on each and every aspect, either you work on a project which is of a large scale, or if you work on a very small detail of the project, and he would always involve himself into each and every aspect. And the good part is that when the learning is when each and every aspect, he would like to see on the full scale model. And we had a good model maker in our office. So either it is a bench detail or a large scale plan where how the functionality was, he would always advise us also, as well as in a team, that make models and understand that how it goes. And he likes those full scale models, which essentially helps you to understand each and every part of it. So that is the initial time. I was not directly at those time involved with him. When he was working, we used to see his work and how his methods of work. Also, by that time when we were working, we used to spend some time on his projects and drawings what we had in Sangath. And so understanding when we were studying his drawing as well as his project, I think that is the time I spent a lot of time to understand his philosophy and the way he works with material, light, or I'll say a climate, and how he is not only to responding to those certain parameters in terms of the design, but how do you articulate those parameters and try to create something which is more exciting into the entire design process. So he takes those challenges in a way that he converts those challenges into something more creatively and creates something more exciting into this entire process. So that is a time that those conversations we had. I was working on I Am Udaipur project, and we make some models, and one day he comes and tells us that, like, there was a central plaza into it, and he used to tell us that, how do you see that in the climate of Udaipur when it is a hot summer, how do people use this a plaza? And he said, you give a certain option there, how people use this in plaza into that particular thing. And it questioned us in a way that, how do you make sure that you create a certain spaces where even though it is a hot summer day in Udaipur, and people can still use the plaza. So it was a certain kind of assessment to what work we were doing, and it was giving a certain cues that we have to do some changes which accommodate those particular parameters of the climate, and you will have to make sure it functions. But he did not specifically say what is to be done. So that much flexibility, or that much say of freedom in a design one was trying to give, and you have to make your own choices that how do you want to take those advice further and to evolve the design. So these are the initial working with him and learning process with him when we were in the studio as such.
Wonderful. I think that kind of does the right kind of a start to the panel discussion, taking us back to the days when Doshi sir would come, in the studio, and we would all be so very excited and curious just to know what Doshi sir is about to say.
Yes.
So this is exactly how a typical Doshi sir would come and interact. So thank you so much, Vijayji, for initiating this wonderful discussion. I will definitely come back to you and know more from you about Doshi sir. I would like to now bring in Mansi into the discussion. So Mansi, I remember during our days at Sangath, when Doshi sir would come to you and work on the Bhadra project. So I would like you to please step in and tell us how your association with Doshi sir started, and how that design development stories happened during the Bhadra project. So please share with us.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Architects Diary, for organizing this event, and Aman for moderating. So I'll jump right in. So I joined Sangath in 2010 after I finished my undergrad at Dept and I went to Cornell for my master's. I came back from the US and I decided I want to work at Sangath. And I applied and then I got hired and then I started working on the Bhadra project. I first started working on the bus stop at Lal Darwaja, and I was working with Sonke Hoof, who's also at Sangath. And we were doing some design development and, it was just starting ideas on the project. And at that time, I remember in the beginning when I joined in April 2010, Doshi sir would come to the office. He would come to the studio briefly and then he would be, in his office and then he would leave. But he would come in intermittently and come and try to see what was going on. And I think maybe 1 week after I was there, I saw him come in and he was like, I introduced myself and he was asking what I'm working on. And and it kind of began like that. Over the next 2-3 months after we finished working on the bus stop, we came to some kind of early design ideas with the bus stop. The Bhadra project started picking up and the plaza was being pedestrianized, the Bhadra Plaza from Teen Darwaza to Bhadra Fort. So we were to make tender drawings for that project, and there was some amount of design which was done and we kind of started on that. So I got into the project with Suparna, and at that time Suparna, who was also in the office, Suparna Maiti, was working on the project. And Rajeev sir was involved with us and we were relooking at what was designed and kind of firming it up and getting into the tender drawing stage. So I remember like 6 months into my time at the office, we did the tender drawings for the Bhadra project. Doshi sir, like I mentioned, was, would come in, look at what is going on. And like how Vijay was saying, he would walk around with curiosity, look at what everybody was doing. And he would keep encouraging us to make models. So I remember we did make a model before making those drawings as well of like all the way from the river to Teen Darwaza to kind of see. And then he also talked to us and he's like, maybe you should make some more. And, so we expanded the model a little bit more. So he was constantly talking about that. And when Doshi sir would come to the office, everybody would be very curious to see what he's going to say, where he's going to go. And, it was a very exciting time for all of us young architects. After the tender drawings for Bhadra were done, the project, actually the AMC was ready to move forward with the project. And at that point, Doshi sir kind of got a little bit more involved. And we actually, when he decided that he's going to get more involved in the project, we actually moved upstairs in the office from the main studio. And it was Suparna, Hardik, Jagar, and me, the three of us, and we had a couple of interns. And it was very interesting because he started coming every day slowly. And we were like Hardik was working on the bus stop, Suparna was working on the plaza, and I was doing both things a little bit, helping out. And so it was very interesting. Like I remember from that time, there was a discussion about the bus stop project, and we were talking about how many bus lanes we were going to provide. And we said, okay, based on the site, we're only able to provide a certain number. And then he had this example, which you might have heard before as well. He said that, when you go to a doctor and there's something wrong with your leg, are you going to just give the patient a solution that I'm going to cut your leg off? Or are you going to try to find out what are you going to tell the patient? And he said, this is how you need to think. You cannot tell me that you cannot provide, you have to find a way. So, it was very interesting to hear him and listen to his stories and analogies and try to see how we could push ourselves and think further. With me, I remember when we were working on the plaza, at one point, I was looking at the plaza and I got interested, and I saw that the size was very similar to the Piazza San Marco in Venice. And I did a juxtaposition of the Piazza San Marco on the plaza, and this kind of really sparked his interest. And he came over and he was looking at it. And then we started thinking of comparing it with other plazas all over the world. We started looking at the Mughal gardens. And so I remember at that point, it was very interesting. And he gave me an interesting exercise where he said, take the Piazza San Marco and break it up and put those shapes exactly on the plaza and see how they kind of fit. And this was the first time I was working like that. And I think it was a very useful tool that I saw him use. So yeah, so that's how the association started. And then at some point, I think Suparna and Hardik also moved on in their careers and left Sangath. And so I was working predominantly with Sir on the Bhadra project. And I worked on this project all the way from design till the construction on site. And Doshi sir was involved for almost the next 2 years. Every day he would come in and he would be working on the plaza. And it was very interesting because the design completely changed. So what we had done during the tender and what had gotten approved, and as we moved forward, everything started slowly changing quite a lot. The idea was the same, but everything started changing a lot. And to me as a young architect and this was my first experience in an architecture office, I was I was a little bit worried because I was also dealing with all the consultants and they were like, okay, we need the drawings and and things were changing. And one of the first things Doshi sir said that you've not considered the Tazia procession, which is going to go through the plaza. And so suddenly that had to be included. So the size of the Karanj Bagh changed. We were proposing many more trees to be planted, but all of that started changing. And what was very interesting to me was that Sir was looking at, even though he had been involved and made proposals for Bhadra also all the way in the 1960s when he was working on the Premabai Hall, he was looking at everything with a fresh eye. And, he took nothing for granted. Everything was questioned. And just that curiosity and, the want to kind of do the best that he could was amazing. So we started interacting with all the different people on the site. Like we had a meeting with the Bhadrakali temple and, discussed with them what they would like and how we could propose something. Then we looked at Karanj Bagh again, went and saw the Chinmay statue, which was there at that point, and saw what we could do and how we're going to change or add something. We went to Premabai Hall, which was obviously very dear to Doshi sir, and visited that building as an office and saw how we could relate it to the plaza. So like that, all the different elements of the plaza suddenly became, revived. And I remember at one point, I had like 10 different presentations of the project. One was for the municipal office when we used to go to the client. There was a different proposal for, the mosque on the side, a different presentation and drawings for the mosque, for the temple, for Premabai Hall, for UCO Bank, which was a building that we were going to be removing. And then we did a very detailed survey with a lot of, very good interns at that point in the office of all the different hawkers that were there on the site. The number, the type of the hawkers, whether it was shoes, clothes, other miscellaneous items, and also the kind of stalls they used. So I think it was jumping into this project with a completely new eye when Doshi sir joined. And and then we went on and finally finalized everything and also made construction drawings. And then I was also supervising on site and when construction was going on. This is just a little bit about Bhadra.
Great. I think that takes the panel discussion to a very interesting form, Mansi, because I see this very strong connect between what you said and what Mr. Vijay said is the relevance of making model in Sangath. So I think that is something that makes Sangath and Doshi sir's method of designing so unique, because this also, brings into my memory during my time at Sangath, when I was working on the JD Center of Art project, and we had this, meeting with artist Jatin Das, and we were doing models from 1:100 scale to 1:50 scale. And then eventually one day when this meeting was to happen, we decided that Doshi sir said that, okay, let's make a model of one block on 1:20 scale. So it was almost like this big model. So I remember I worked almost the entire night, and then the next day, when the meeting was about to start, I took the model for the meeting. And then suddenly he said, okay, take this model back and put one human being inside the space and then bring this model back. So I understood the relevance of imagining a space with respect to that one human being sitting inside the space, and his unique way of making anybody understand a space, by bringing these little references. So that is very interesting. Taking this idea of making models further, I will now request Chinmay to step in, because it also brings to my memory that I would always see this huge model of Kanoria Center of Arts next to his table, which will always be a learning experience just by looking at that nice fluid form. So Chinmay, I'm very intrigued to know your association and connect with Doshi sir, because there is a special Pune connect between you and sir. So I will request you to please step in and share your stories and how it all started with Sangath and Doshi sir.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you very much, the Architect's Diary, Kamlaja. It's an absolute privilege to talk about sir in any capacity. And it's a great honor to have Rajeev sir, who has been our mentor and guide during our time in Sangath, listening. And it's a sheer joy to associate and talk along with my friends Aman, Mansi, and Vijay. So I'll begin by remembering sir actually. It was on the day of, I joined Sangath in 2009, and it was my time at the interview when I had this quest to meet sir. And my interview was taken by Rajiv sir, and Zonke was there. And I just after the interview, I requested Zonke, is there any possibility that I meet sir? Because being out of Sangath, I was under an impression absolutely under an impression that sir har roz to aayenge nahi and we won't be getting an opportunity, but any little point of time we'll be in that zone, we'll be in that office, we'll learn from so many other. That was the intention, to just join. But to my sheer surprise, I got this unique privilege to work with him for all those days whenever I was at Sangath, and day in day out we used to work on projects. So it was like two projects I primarily worked. One was Kanoria, which Aman rightly mentioned. The other was an extension project for Gandhi Labour Institute, which also happened when I was there. So I'll begin by the first reminiscing about the first interaction. So after the interview, I was standing in the garden and just chatting with someone about the logistics about 15 days joining. And to my sheer surprise, sir walked out. And in the sense of joy, I forgot that we started talking, and right from the start of the building to the gate of the Sangath, I mean, that entire unique experience of traversing the garden diagonally, we were talking, and sir was talking in Marathi because we belong to Pune. When I mentioned I'm from Pune, so he immediately switched and he began in Marathi. So most of the time, as Aman mentioned, there was this special connect, and sir usually spoke in Marathi, particularly when we were working. So regarding Kanoria, there are many stories, and we'll be sharing as I go along. But some very interesting things which I would love to share at the onset is about, there are experiences regarding designing of that particular space. There are experiences of what exactly happens when it is being executed, and there are experiences related to supervising what is being executed. So in case of designing, I was amazed to see sir, 85-year-old old gentleman. He was working computers so efficiently and so effectively. Particularly this trait of he not knowing the exact details ki kaun sa key dabane se kya hone wala hai, he was able to generate a fabulous output from that entire thing. And being a newbie there, trying to learn ArchiCAD, a VM software which they use in Sangath, and sir used to throw so many amazing tasks at me about, like, we are working on an elevation and suddenly he will say ki now orbit this and mere ko 3D dikhao. And it used to be a complete fun experience. But nonetheless, we learned so much all our days in Sangath. And one particular point which Vijay mentioned, Mansi also elaborated, was about use of models. So this entire thing started, we had a model of 1:300 of that entire Kanoria site, which was being worked upon. Simultaneously, there was a model of the building block, an 85-meter long building. It was at 1:100. And then there was a part of the building which we were working on in 2009. That part was at a scale of 1:50. And then we had another part of a building, part of a wall, which was extremely important. The articulation of the edge of the entire sculpted form, that was made at 1:20. And then we had models which were like 5:1. The handle details were made at 5:1 or 2:1, exploded scale. So all these skills were being worked at simultaneously, and it was an experience in itself. I'll try my best to recollect and shed some light on working about it. But to initiate something, I suppose this was the extremely fun element of working there. Very enriching one.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Chinmay.
Can I
Yes,
just,
yes, please.
yeah. I think I saw Rajeev sir had joined the webinar. I'm unable to see him now. Oh, yes. Hello, good evening, sir. And I'm really glad that you were able to join us. You would have to unmute. So you would have to unmute yourself. There is a bottom an option where there's a little microphone. You can unmute yourself.
This part is fine. I was trying to change the background because I'm sitting in a hall which is not designed by me, and it's because I'm out for a presentation and there is a gap between what I have to present. So I said, let me just join the conversation just now. So thank you all for joining this wonderful discussion that I heard little parts of. I missed out the early part, but I'm glad to be here with all of you.
Actually, we are also glad that you were able to make it, and almost 60 people are live. So I'm really excited that you have joined us.
So, so tell me. I think I was given a whole list of questions. Those questions and answer them, or do you want to just say some things in general? And I can speak there.
Kamalaja, shall I step in, or would you like?
Yes, of course.
Okay, wonderful.
Moderator.
So, first of all, thank you, Rajeev sir, for joining. All of us have been looking forward for your presence, and we are extremely delighted that you could make it for the panel discussion. So what we have done so far is we have heard very interesting stories and experiences of architecture with Doshi sir from Mr. Vijay, Chinmay, and Mansi. And we are all very curious to know a lot more from you, considering the fact that you had the longest time of association with sir. So what I had in mind is that I wanted to post one question to Mr. Vijay, and then I would like to bring you in, introduce you once again, and then we'll have you say, the entire stories and a lot more. And there's a list of questions which I have that I want to know from you, and the entire country would like to know from you. So is that okay with your permission, sir?
Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Mr. Vijay, I was very intrigued to know, like you explained your long association with Sangath, probably more than 10 years. And you explained how it all started with Doshi sir and with Sangath. I would now be very interested to know that we have all seen Sangath as such a long established practice. What do you think that really makes Sangath an ever relevant and relevant even in today's time? How does one, what values of Doshi sir or Sangath have remained, that makes it such a strongly relevant practice that the entire world looks up to and wants to become part of such a practice? Please share your, some thoughts on this.
Okay. Very interesting question. So maybe I'll answer in a way that the kind of first is the learning from the past. So whatever we obviously Doshi sir, his practice and whatever benchmark he has set, and I think if you start from his early projects and then say either it is with his projects on Aranya where he has worked on the low cost housing, or I am Bangalore where it is a management institute, and many more projects, or a sangath. But every project is something which is unique. You will not find that there is a repetition in terms of the I'll say a language, I'll say in a way. Each project is very unique to its context and its use, and trying to understand the need of that place, or trying to understand the material of that place, and to evolve a design around it. And also, when you are resolving, or maybe you are designing something, you are also trying to resolve a larger issues, maybe at a I'll not say a country, but a society, what we are facing as such. So I think that is the kind of and every project becomes like a new start. It is not something that you take it from past or take it from your previous project and start. So every project is a fresh start with the design philosophy. So in that reference, what we see is that the opportunity here is in a way that how do you put into this entire but with that learning, how do you take it forward, that learning, and maybe try to work on many, or maybe projects where you can take this learning and you can try a new projects with where it's located, what is its context, what is the need of the client, and what do you want to do at the end as an architect. And all those opportunities you get into this organization, and that design philosophy, we take it forward as such from the learning from Doshi.
Wonderful. I think that was very interesting to know that from you, Mr. Vijay. I will request Mr. Rajeev to step in now. Sir, we actually had a list of questions to ask from you. And I will personally would want to know, please tell us your association with Doshi sir as a partner, as a son-in-law, and also please share with us the qualities of Doshi sir, other than as a teacher, as an academician, as a practitioner. What are those attributes of his personal disciplined life? You know, if you may want to share that with all of us, that makes him such a great gentleman. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aman. You know, very few people are fortunate to have two fathers. It sounds strange. I was born, nurtured by one, and then was taken by another and exposed to the world in different ways. And this carried on, and I've been lucky that both of them been there almost right till this age, when I'm, ripe age myself. So there are like guides. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, let me tell you how I'd heard of him as a student, but I'd never met him. In 1986, there was the Indira Gandhi Center for the Arts competition in Delhi. And I just returned from the US after my studies abroad and working abroad. And I came back and I was associated on the technical commission. And Jeffrey Baba, Jim Sterling, and others, Kapila Vatsyan, Fumiko Maki, they were all there on the jury. And as luck would have it, I was asked to present the slides from the technical commission side to the jurors. So I sat in for the jurors' deliberations. It was quite an exposure to see how the jurors met, how they discussed things, and the kinds of issues that they discussed about. I never thought that I'd meet him again. That was it. Then as luck would have it, a year later, as they say, that the master chooses you. when you are ripe, you will fall into the lap of your guru. So I think that's what happened with me. But I think my master didn't have a choice, because when I was announced to him, I was announced that, hey, this is your future son-in-law, over a phone call that my wife made in the middle of the night once we decided to get married. So he had no choice in the matter, and he had to sort of, whether they liked it or not, accept me as disciple. So that's how we first met. And the interesting part was that when he called up and told him that, he was completely nonchalant, and he says, are you happy? He asked only one question, are you happy? And she said, yes. And he put the phone down. And he was actually in Italy with his wife. And when she found out that this is what is happening middle of the night, she said, what's wrong with you? Next morning, let's take the next flight back home. And so then then he came, he said, I want to come and meet you. So he came to meet me in Delhi. This was now official, because before that, none of our parents knew about all of this. So he came to meet me. And in the conversation, he says, tell me, which are the buildings you admire in Delhi? Why don't you take me around and show me? So I thought about it for a bit. And then I said, all contemporary architecture, I'm sure he's familiar with. He knows them as friends. So you probably know what's been built in Delhi at that point. And so I said, I won't take you to see contemporary architecture. I'll take you to a strange place, which I find fascinating. And I took him to this old tomb and mosque called Jamali Kamali's Tomb and Mosque in Mehrauli. It was not very well known at that point. Now, of course, it's much better known. It's a fantastic location, in the wilderness, set the way it is, the way it sort of meets the ground, and the way it sort of connects, and the journey to it. And the moment we started on that journey, then he started talking about the journey of how he discovered in Sangath that you approach things obliquely. You don't move in directly. How do you how the mind works and how your senses work, and they get exposed to to nature. And then by the time you arrive into a building, your thoughts are changed. And so a conversation began. Then the next thing he says, my daughter tells me you have these sketchbooks, which you were doing this architectural pilgrimage in Europe, and she keeps talking about, show me. So rather reluctantly, I shared with him my sketchbooks, which I'd done in Europe. And he looked at them. Then he says, you ask a lot of questions in these sketchbooks, but actually you have all the answers there also. And then he started pointing out things which I had never observed, where I had written down things from the sketches. And he says, there's your answer. So this was this great ability to discover things for you and point them out to you and say, oh, look, there's another way of looking at this whole thing that you're talking about. The next thing that I thought was very fascinating, and here was this great, very famous architect talking to somebody who's not even started a career, is a little bit, there's this gap between, even though I'm going to become his son-in-law, he was a person who could relate to you at any level. You ask a child, if he meets a child, he'll talk to the child in the same way that he will talk to an adult and make each one feel comfortable. And this, I think, is a very unique gift that he had. So I used to always, later on, and when we, of course, got to know each other much better, I would always joke about this thing of his curiosity. And I'd say, Aapka naam to Balkrishna hai na, to phir leke you're always going to remain young. We'll all get old and you keep remaining young. So these were kinds of things that as time went by, we shared. Then, of course, he had also a great reverence for his gurus. He would always talk about Corbusier with this thing that as a guru, what he learned. And he would talk about anecdotes with his being with him. And I remember, he says, musicians, he used to love classical music. He used to love all kinds of music, as a matter of fact, but all the names like Pandit Bhimsen or Kumar Gandharv, all would come and stay with him. And he says, before they start, they pay obeisance to their gurus. And he says, for every job, I always think, what is Papa Corbusier saying? What is so-and-so saying? And another fascinating thing was he could sign like Corbusier. So then initially he gave me some books and he signed Corbusier, Le Corbusier out there. And he copied his signature exactly. You can't differentiate between the two. So these were some of the fascinating things. And I had, studied at Chandigarh. I had traveled around the world seeing Corbusier's buildings in Europe. And when I truly got to know the person and know him and understand his work was when I met Mr. Doshi. Because what he explained to me about the person and the kinds of habits and the things that he was looking at was very different. And so all the things that you see, it was fashionable to run down Corbusier in Chandigarh. It was fashionable to sort of say that he never understood urban design or urban planning and he did buildings only. The fact is that I think he did a lot more. So this was something that I learned from him. His stories about Kahn or Corbusier always were lessons in trying to understand what architecture is about. He would talk about the office as if it was a temple. He'd say it's an offering you give out there. You go there, it's not work. It's not a workplace. So when you say, what is Sangath like? Sangath is a place of pilgrimage. It's a place of, where pilgrims come every day. I mean, students come in hordes. People from all over the world come as a pilgrimage. So I look at it as a sacred place where you make offerings. So therefore, the work you do, the onus is on you to make those offerings of a level and credibility that will help the world move ahead, to change the world. And that was his other thing, that he says that, what do you give back to society? He says, society has given us so much. We are privileged. We must keep giving it back. And on the top of his table, there was an old faded parchment paper of Gandhiji. There was a couple of lines which are written by Gandhiji, quoted out there. It says, when you look at the face of the poorest of the poor, and you say, what can I do for him? And will it satisfy him? Will it give him hope? Then I think you fulfill your. I'm not exactly saying the exact lines, but roughly that. And there is a picture of him spinning the charkha. So these were his totems, or let's say benchmarks. He would talk about, of course, not only Gandhiji, but about Tagore. And he would talk about, how the winds of the world would pass through your thing, but you should not be shaken from your roots. And another funny story, I'll just connect to this. When I started teaching at SPA, there was a magazine that I came across one day when we were discussing, some of the faculty, and I were discussing about architecture. And there was this magazine, and there were a couple of pictures of all the name things of various famous Indian architects and their works. And there was a picture of Sangath. And I pointed to that picture and I said, this is the only man who seems to know what he's doing, because that was also fashionable at that point to look at Indian identity. And a lot of architects were trying to search for this Indian identity. I think for Mr. Doshi, he grew up, his childhood was in a joint family, an extended family. He grew up in a small house with staircases running in strange places, a house that had been added over time. And he actually lived this. He says, life, birth, marriages, death, all these would be celebrated. All the festivals would be celebrated. We would go to the temple, we would go to the villages. And he would describe how the skin of his feet would feel when he walked onto the black floor of the temple, which was slightly wet. He would talk about the smell of the mogra flowers, which were being sold outside, and as you walked in, and what you smelt, and that sense of smell that came back. So there was this other side. There was one side which said about duty and dharma, the other side that talked about these very fine feelings which he had imbibed over time as a child, and which he used to, draw into all the time. When he was talking about architecture, he would draw upon all these feelings all the time and keep searching for that. So how rough should a stone be? How polished should be the other side of it, which is in contrast? How the rain would change the edges of a building when it had moldings on it, and how the rain would creep down, and how large gargoyles in Rajasthan would, once in a blue moon, once monsoon after several years, would overflow. And that is why they were so large. And so this whole thing about anticipation, about waiting for things to happen, it was a learning experience that I think it is hard to teach theoretically. It is only by discussing, sharing, talking that you can share this with students. Because till you see these things yourself and you're primed to look at those, you don't realize it. And so our discussions were always these kind of, it's not that he would not also suggest books. He would say, I don't read too much, but he has a huge library, a very well-stocked library. And he's probably one of the best read people I've come across. And he could, he would talk about, from Roman times, he would talk about Marcus Aurelius and his meditations. He would talk about Paul Valéry, the French philosopher. He would talk about the Medicis and their giving back to society and setting up, centers of art, Michelangelo. So it was these kinds of things which I think affected my ways of looking at things. So he would say, now, how did Michelangelo do this? Why were he looking at this? And then we'd talk about a sculpture and say, look at the structure of the skin and the bones and how do they come together? And so these were these kinds of nuances, I think, which made architecture far more exciting to be as part of a larger whole. So maybe that gives you an introduction to the kind of person. And then he also had a fund of very, what would I say, risk jokes, which he would tell you over a drink. He would tell you these, and then we would have conversations. So our relationship was of a friend. I never thought of him as my father-in-law as such. I always thought of him as a friend. And we would spend evenings discussing things. In fact, sometimes the family would say, hey, you've hijacked him. Both of you, you're having this conversation and the rest are left out. So there used to be this always warnings. Listen, let's get everybody into the conversation. So I don't know if that sort of gives you some.
Wonderful. We were all ears, Rajeev sir, and these are some of the never heard stories of Doshi sir and your associations with Doshi sir. This is so very amazing. I want to ask you, Rajeev sir, do you have enough time if I come back, or else I have another question right away to ask you. So that will kind of keep it rolling actually. So one more question that I have, Rajeev sir, is that no, this is purely from the perspective of the younger generation of architects. Now I'll now be talking about Doshi sir's ability to create magic on design. Now we are living in this world of softwares, and the younger generation of architects have this perspective that softwares allow you to make more iterations, hence you become more creative. Now from here, I'll take, I'll go back to the time when Doshi sir started his practice, when there were no computers and there were only hand drafting. And it used to take like really long to draft a plan, so the only tool that was left with you was a pencil. And all the iterations that were to be done was only with the pencil, and there were no 3D tools, visualization tools. So how come Doshi sir did this magic on the table? What made him so different that he could manage to create even during those days? What is your message for us as young architectural practitioners? Please share some light on that perspective.
One of the habits that I picked up from him and which he picked up from Corbusier was this whole thing of having a little small diary which he keeps in his pocket. In fact, he designed his clothes around that, his jackets or his shirts, he'd have two pockets, one for his diary, one for his pens. And it's a small black diary. In fact, I have one with me, was lying a little farther away. Yeah, there, Vijay is showing. We all use this diary. It's a spiral bound diary, which we all sort of get paper cut and it's done in the office. And he would always continuously keep drawing in it. He would keep drawing, sketching, writing. And the thing that I learned that, sketching allows you to connect with your faculties in a way that no computer allows you. It allows you a freedom because you can make mistakes. You can change things. You don't have to be very specific. A computer says, okay, what is the dimension? So you already, whereas in a sketch, you can, and I'll give you another instance. I remember we had gone to, when we got commissioned to do the diamond course in Mumbai, Prakulla complex, went with the clients to see the boat Antwerp, then we went to London, and right through he would observe carefully how people were working, what was the sequence of things, what were the kinds of interactions taking place. But more importantly, at the end of the day, he would come up with some fantastical sketches, which were not very specific, but they were fantastic images. Oh, you must have this and you must have that. And we all understood that these were sort of just to tickle the imagination. And by the end of the tour, which was about a week, the clients were already sold on a basic design idea, not a concept, but idea. That this is what it should be. There should be, the heart should be this, the side should be like this. And then there are so many people coming in, thousands. And in India, you have so many thousands of people. Trading takes place on the streets, not inside formally, in these kinds of things. So he clarified a whole lot of ideas through the sketchbook and through these sketches. So that ability to draw, and not necessarily beautiful sketches, though he did beautiful sketches, he had fantastic artistic abilities. But it was about this whole idea of how do you connect with your left and right side of the brain. See, the right side of the brain is what when you draw, the left side is when you write, because you have to think through. So both these, if you use as a tool to combine the two things together and produce things, both of them make a difference. This is what I learned. And this thing was that not only was it sketching, but then every new technology that came up. So when the Xerox machine came up, he says, how do I use this? So, from the age of pencil and rotring drafting, he started making copies and overlaying copies and doing things using that as a tool. I mean, it was fantastic. The fax machines, how do you overlay things and say juxtapose things in odd ways, which you would never do if you were drawing each one in detail. So you'd say, okay, let's cut, paste, collage. And a new way of doing things came about. In fact, I remember one time we said, we made a block model and we cut sections, and then we make Xeroxes of the sections to get the dimensions. So what looked right visually, you cut it and you said, okay, this is the dimension at this point, and every 2 meters, if you cut it at scale, this is what you'll get. So they were all these kinds of techniques that we worked out using whatever technology was available. And then as we went along, computers came in. And then, of course, I remember I was the first one to introduce computers at Sangath. When I moved my office, Mansar, in '89 to this thing, I came with, I think, 2 computers. And those were the early days when CAD was hardly a big thing, especially on, and I used Macintosh machines. And then we made it 4. And then when Diamond Boots happened, I said, listen, we must change to computers because we'll never get this project done in the timelines and the complexity that we're talking about. And so we bought a whole lot of things from the US, imported them, set it up, and Sangath computerized. And then he says, oh my God, I can't use this stuff. But he would sit with a person and he would be more innovative than the person using it. He'd say, why didn't you try this? Why didn't you try this? And that, his mind used to work really fast. I mean, he was extremely agile in thinking and not being hesitant to try out. What if it goes wrong? So what? Try again. I've never heard him say, listen, if he failed, then what? I've never heard him say that. It was always about, chalo, dekhte kya hota hai. Let's try it out and see. So that attitude, I think, is something that brought about change in the ways that you used even the tools. I mean, young people would learn that for any tool, you'd find new nuances of how to use it. He was never stuck with the same way that this is routine. So how do you find the exception? To him, finding the exception was the challenge, not the routine.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, this is something so very important, sir. Doshi sir's unique way of looking everything fresh. Because during my little experience and association with Doshi sir, I remember we were doing a rendering of a 3D model of the JD Center of Art. And while the 3D model was being rendered, it showed transitions from a very highly pixelated screen towards very, very finely pixelated, like a very sharp image. So while the rendering was still in process, he asked me to stop the render and asked me if we can have this kind of a texture on the wall. And I thought, why, the render should stop only, then we should try and discuss. But this was something so fresh, because he was seeing everything from a very different perspective. For me, it was just a rendering process, but for him, it was the textural quality of the laterite stone that we can put from the highly textured laterite to a finely textured laterite stone. So this is so very amazing, sir. Thank you so much. I would like to bring Mansi here from the discussions on Doshi sir's capacity as an academician, and now listening to Rajeev sir's stories, which explains so much about Doshi sir's ability and his way of life. Mansi, why don't you throw some light on your experiences of writing book, Doshi sir's book called The Paths Uncharted. How did that start? And what side of Doshi sir could you see? Please share that with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aman. Thank you, Rajeev sir. It was so nice to listen to you after all this while and talk about Doshi sir like this. It took us all back, I think, to the days at Sangath when we were there. And I think so, coming to the book that you talked about, Aman, so while I was at the office for about 4 years, I think 2 years in, I'd also worked with Rajeev sir on the Alembic project. Bhadra was a little bit on a break. And then suddenly one day Doshi sir comes in with a manuscript. And I think it was a A4 size bunch of papers. And he said, okay, and it was very informal. He suddenly came, he gave this to me and he said, can you go through this? And I was like, okay, I was very excited. I started going through, and it was a bunch of his writings, all somebody before had kind of compiled everything. We just kind of started. And I remember I was thinking when Rajeev sir was saying of different techniques that he used, like Xeroxing from the model. I remember while working on this book, it was about 6 months, but it feels like it was a really long time because I completely lost all sense of time. Doshi sir was so involved. He would come in at 9 a.m. and he would be there till 6 p.m. He would take a break during lunch and he would come straight to my desk. He would be sitting there the whole time. He would go for lunch and a break, and then he would come back and he would be there till 6. And he was in his 80s at this point, but the amount of dedication and energy that he had, and he was so agile, like Rajeev sir was mentioning. He was constantly thinking, and even though it was a book where there was a lot of writing and text, and but we were using many different techniques. I remember, like, I had almost, when we figured out, okay, we are going to use A5 size to print, I had almost 10 versions of that book, little books printed in the printer on A4 size and then folded up together and bound together. So we always had that whole image of what this was going to be in front of us as a technique while we were working on the book. And I think for me, that experience of working with him was something, it was almost like going back to school in a way. It was a very surreal experience. I've never really talked about it in detail, but it has definitely been one of those moments which has completely changed my life. Not just the way I looked at architecture, but just looking at life on the whole. And he was reminiscing and reflecting on his own journey. And through that, there were so many lessons learned and so many stories that I read about, everything from when he was a young boy in the joint family to when he had a serious accident and the experiences he had at that point, to how he went to JJ school and then to London and then to Paris to work with Corbusier. All those experiences, and then it was all tied in his book, which I have right here with several sketches, which were also from his little black books. I think a lot of them were scans from his sketches that he made. And the whole thing was a very creative process because like this is one of the pages from the book where you can see a sketch is juxtaposed behind the text. And, it was a experience, like, and then, there would be notes and sketches and writing and all kinds of things juxtaposed in so many different ways, which I don't think I've ever seen in any book in this fashion. And so this experience really, I lost all sense of time. I learned about his journey, and through it, I feel I really learned about myself. And that has really shaped me, to who I am today. And I say to my close family and friends that, he was almost like a grandfather figure to me. And it, through this experience of working in the book, where I, connected with him, learned from him, and just imbibed so much, which is difficult to express. But it was a blessing. And yeah, I think it was one of the most enriching experiences, those 6 months in my life.
Thank you, Mansi. That is pretty interesting. And in fact, I have been reading this book, rereading this book, and the style is so fresh and it makes it so simple for any reader to read. So this is wonderful. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Taking this part of Doshi sir's ability to read, to teach, and as an academician, I would now request Chinmay, if you can please step in. And all of us know, Chinmay, you are also very actively teaching in universities and colleges. So what part of Doshi sir's teachings as an academician, as a teacher, has affected and your way of teaching? So please share some light on that, because we see lots of young architecture schools coming in and with lots of young faculties, but the key to teach and that real impulse to teach is missing. So please share something on that.
It's more to thank you, Aman. It was a treat to listen to Rajeev sir. It really got us nostalgic and for our times in sangath. So your question actually about being a good teacher is associated, as always, to being a very good student. So one has to be a very good student in order to try and share something, whatever little we could. So initial inception days, like I had my first experience with this Doshi sir, who was an enigma in himself. He had this amazing grand way of working about a penchant for living life zestfully, which almost flowed into whatever he did. So just trying to sum up, I mean, the one of the very crucial lessons is about never about sir's quality of linking architecture as a human experience. So it's about almost talking to buildings. It's almost like having a dialogue with multiple elements within a particular space, having multiple articulations and being there, humanizing every element. This is what he always did. So linking architecture to multiple human elements about stories. For example, when we were working on Kanoria, if at all people know, I mean, if you approach Kanoria Center from Sept Maidan, which used to be. So right at the point, he created a diagonal column with hard hitting edge, and he used to always tell me some stories that ye Kanoria ka naak hai, and I want somebody to be really hit by that sort of a column when somebody approaches. And then other story was about like we actually did Kanoria building, and the building had 90-degree edges. So one, he and if I'm not wrong, Rajeev sir and they traveled to in China, Shenzhen, I suppose. And there, after coming back, he tells me a story about how he met a Japanese chef who actually chopped bananas, and they were sliced apart. And then immediately we tried that making 45 degrees cut to that entire art gallery and then creating this beautiful facade. So this was the first learning. One has to be open and anticipating multiple dynamic life experiences and plugging it into whatever they are doing. In fact, creating architecture as well. Second very crucial thing which most of us spoke was about never ever working in isolation. I mean, this is like generating human experiential, then materialistic, physical contexts around what we are doing. So he always had this unique way of working where he used to juxtapose multiple drawings, multiple contexts, multiple things which are etched in his memories. For example, we were doing this Kanoria gallery. Then he made me make Sarkej Rosa's plan next to each other. We juxtapose. Then there were certain elements in even Sir Corbusier's building, Mill Owners Association. So we had this unique way of working on multiple projects where we juxtapose drawings just to see. almost this unique sense of developing curiosity is something which is very evidently in his persona. So he was very curious to know what exactly happens when that Amdavad Textile Millowners Association buildings is juxtaposed to Kanoria Center, and what is it that we are able to see. So respecting and generating context, never working in isolation is another thing. And third, very crucial, is about all entire, not just architecture, but like living life in itself. He had this enormous ability and quest for discovery and rediscovery. So he always used to tell me whenever he used to find a gloomy face or around. So I remember him saying, ki, when you discover something new every day, you will never be bored. And that is something he always was. We could see a personification in he living it that way. So there are multiple scales of models. It's just a version of this discovery, this juxtaposition of multiple buildings, multiple elevations, multiple memories, and then multiple drawings, multiple viewpoints, how you design a particular space or how you look at a particular thing. This is everything coming from this ability and this quest to discover and rediscover a particular thing. So these are few things which I could, if at all, I could sum up. And as a teacher, what I have always felt, just Mansi said, na, I always felt this sort of a grandfatherly love from him. It was always his affection and love which supersedes every other quality which we have experienced. Most of us have experienced. So three things very crucial. I try to sum up, and I try to even in the studios or whatever young crop we engage in, we try to always have this sort of exchange. Always be curious in order to know more. Always be extremely generous so that you share more, and always be encouraging and affectionate in order to help somebody grow more. So these are some peculiar things which I think I picked up from him when because of his association, and many such anecdotes and meaning. But he always, once again, I remember, I'll stop by narrating this small story. He talked about this story of being a banyan. So he once came and we were discussing something, and there was a big people tree, I mean, on our side. And he talked about a story about a banyan tree. And he told me, Chinmay, तुला या banyan सारखं बनना है. So he said in Marathi, he said कि आपको इस banyan tree जैसा बनना है. So what does this mean? Is like when I sounded confused as every time, so he elaborated, and he said, see, look at a banyan, and it will have all those insects loitering around, feeding around on those insects. Saints can come on this banyan to have a shade. Even dacoits take shade under this banyan. Honeybees come there. Then you have woodpeckers, woodcutters come there, chop it off, but it's still he is standing tall and handsome. So in order, this irrespective of what banyan tree is being dealt, the blows of nature dealing on the banyan tree, it has this natural ability to be of utility to everybody and every aspect of the ecology. So this was his unique way how to help young students like me to groom, and through whatever talks and some events like this, many more people who are not so privileged to have a direct association with him, they might also get a beautiful opportunity to learn and know this great Doshi sir of ours. Yeah, Aman.
Wonderful, Chinmay. That was pretty profoundly put all together. And thank you for sharing that story. I think the story of banyan tree will remain relevant amongst all of us. Thank you so much. Rajeev sir, I would like to ask you one question. I would like to discuss the creative process of Doshi sir, and especially talking about imitation as a part of the creative process. Very recently, I heard somebody narrating me a quote by T.S. Eliot. He said that the closer you are to imitation, the nearer you are to originality. And the only man that I've seen doing this so very profoundly is Doshi sir. Because we have all seen him talking a lot about Louis Kahn and Corbusier And we can also see images and hints and clues of both the great architects in his buildings. But we have also seen Doshi sir distancing himself from the shadows of Khan and Corbusier, and then generating a very fresh kind of an ideology of design, which is Doshi sir's style of architecture. So please share with us, it is very relevant for all the young architects, because there is this bug, among so many architects today, the bug of copying and pasting it. So what is this art of Doshi sir that he could distance himself from, these great giants, and then, bring his own identity and his mind into the creative process? Please share something on that, sir.
He always said, if you copy well. Don't leave it to, being a poor imitation. And by that, he meant something more than just copying as such. What he meant was that you start with a very high benchmark.
Yeah.
Something that you admire, something that you revere. You put that up as your first stage. And then you say, how do I do better than this? And then you say, well, my situation is this now. How do I get there? And slowly that thing that you've copied starts transforming, starts changing, takes a life of its own, because you're concerned about many things. You're concerned the kind of people who will be using it. In that also there are layers. There is people who are very senior. There are people who, I'll tell you what, when we were doing the diamond bourse, it was not only about just doing the site, which was a 20-acre site. I think was one of the, I wish it had been realized in its totality the way it was envisaged. It's a fantastic piece of urban design for a city, like for all our metros as such. And it was not only about the design of the thing, that was the needs of the, it was a place of 30,000 people, a small city by itself. And then the more he thought about it, he says, but listen, where are all these people going to come from? What are the kinds of roads we have? Where will these people who will, some people will bring their food with them, where will the rest of them have their lunch? So are there places where there will be street vendors? There are places which are cool in the shade where they can sit down and have their lunches, not only on site, but off site also. How will the buses come here? How will cars come here? How will people come by the metro or the, at that time, the rail, this thing connection? And so he says, no, we must go to the commissioner of MADA, which was where this came from. And we must talk to him. So he talked to the commissioner. The commissioner says, you're right. He says, you'll have a traffic jam on your roads if you don't plan for them now. And so there was a stakeholders meeting. All the people who had plots on the G block of the Bandra Kulla complex, they were all invited with their architects. And we had a big seminar and everybody came up. There was Hafiz, contractor, there were other people, all of them came for this seminar. And a lot of them raised issues only about their projects, but we were always focusing on the fact that what will happen to the overall ambience and what will happen to the people of the way they come in here of different stratas. So the scope of the thing changed. Gradually today, what you see Bandra Kulla complex is because of all those improvements of by this one pebble of the diamond course that was brought in, and that brought about change. So this thing was never to restrict himself or confine himself to a finite job within finite dimensions. It was always about people, about cities, about the way that is going to affect Mumbai. He said, but what went wrong with Nariman Point? All those compound walls, all those double margins and the waste of space. And so all these were brought in and into the Bandra Kulla complex as ideas. And then these were shown as actual examples to the commissioner and his team. And from that, a new situation evolved altogether. So, coming back to your point, the whole idea of how you copied, but you transformed, this became the leaf motif. He would always start, even with his own projects, he would sometimes take older projects and paste them on, say, okay, let's see, to get a sense of scale, to get a sense of an idea. But it was not that he was going to ever repeat. When I first moved to Amdavad and set up office, I took over the guest house at Sangath. And that I still remain there in the guest house, as a matter of fact. This remains my office. There were 4 posters lying of Corbusier's works from his first project to his last project. And I said, oh, wow, what a find. So I put them up. Then one day he's telling me, he says, you know something, have you noticed? There is no similarity between the projects. So he says, always a new project. And he says, that's what I take pride in, that anything you try, you start from the old, but you transform it into something that is new. And that was very important. So I've always believed that you first dig a hole, jump into it, and you're a smart fellow, you'll figure out how to get out of it. And I think everybody is very smart. Everybody's talented. They have to figure out their own way. And when they figure out their own way, whatever they jumped into, even if the holes are the same, they'll figure out how to get out of it. And this is what I think he meant when he said that you start by copying and copy it well.
Wonderful. That was actually the learning. You copy and you copy to the level that you can actually transform it to something else and you make it your own. And then you bring out something new for others to copy, and then something else, keeps on evolving. This is wonderful, sir.
Example, you would say, when you have a meal and you mix up all this, dal khate ho, sabzi khate ho, roti khate ho, sab alag-alag thali mein dalte ho. Hamari to thali ek saath mein hoti hai na. It is, you can choose, meetha khana hai, namkeen khana hai, mix kar sakte hai. Then he says, at the end of the meal, everything's inside you. Then you have had a satisfying meal and you burp. And all the flavors come together at that point, and that becomes yours then. And that is what happens to your blood. You eat all of this, all the blood becomes yours. And what you then brew with that energy of that blood is yours. It is not a copy any longer.
That is amazing. Thank you for bringing all this to our knowledge, sir. I would like to bring Mr. Vijay here into the discussion. Mr. Vijay, you explained a lot about your connects with Sangath, with Doshi sir, and we also spoke about how Sangath remains such a strongly relevant practice. We would also like to know from you, how do you now from this level take on the legacy of Sangath and Doshi sir's entire engagement of architects to the next level? What are the plans? How do you see this thing going for the next 10, 20, 30 years? Do you plan to sustain the ethos of Sangath? Do you plan to bring in new value systems? How do you see this evolving?
Okay. So I'll tell you that something has to continue. So the continuation part is what Doshi sir legacy and what he has created something and what values he has actually put into this temple. Now taking it forward, the kind of a project and the kind of practice we want to do is something will always remain relevant to the need. So essentially right now, all the projects, if you do most of the projects, we parallelly say our working is either with the public authorities or a government as well as the private sector, but something which is more meaningful to the society is the kind of projects we are taking. You might not have seen any projects where we are doing it for the developers or in that sense. So most of the projects are which are relevant to the society and which has a larger impact as such. So our boundaries or the project boundaries doesn't remain to the site boundaries. It essentially say it is like a pebble in a pond. So how those ripples goes into it. So all the projects what we are doing right now and will be doing it in future, and I think Rajeev sir is also there, will be more on which are more relevant to this society, and it has a larger impact into the overall either a city level structure or it has a more impact on the how this society essentially work. And also it will be a piece of all the projects we are trying with the, I can say, it's not, as we mentioned earlier, it is not something that it is X or Y, like if you are doing in Pune or if you are doing in Kolkata or if you are doing in Udaipur or if you are doing in Delhi or something in Chennai. Every project is a unique project. So we'll continue doing in the same way how the contextual, how it responds to the context, what is the need of that particular place, and mostly all the projects remains in a public in nature.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Vijay. Kamalaja, I wanted to ask you, I have one very interesting question for all of us to conclude. Do you think we should conclude it or we can take it on? Because I will want not to stop this and have, Rajeev sir speak more about Sangath, but I will ask you to step in and please tell me
Yeah,
how
no,
are we placed with the time? Yeah.
definitely. If Rajiv sir has time and I like listening
Great.
to him actually made me smile. I went to the to the stories as if even I was there. So
Wonderful.
I think if everybody's in, of course, I'll be
Great, great.
into all of you.
Great. So let's do one thing. Let's conclude it in such a manner that I'll initiate with Mr. Vijay. Why don't you share one particular space or a building, designed by Doshi sir that has like a real impact on your life, and that you would want to mention that and as a message to the younger architects that definitely go there, sit for 30 minutes and experience. So Vijay sir, why don't you tell me one of your favorite?
So I'll tell you this, when we were working, me and Rajesh sir were working on IIM Udaipur project. That time for a study purpose, I went to IIM Bangalore. And IIM Bangalore, I've seen those plans in his books and all the publication in our office and all. But there are some things that special projects where you can only experience it and then you can realize that how important they are. And that was when I went to IIM Bangalore and I spent almost a day there on that campus. And I think when you walk into that corridor, which essentially connects all the spaces, landscape built, so there are closed spaces which are classrooms, then there are courtyards, then there are large open spaces. And that corridor, I think, which is a connector to all the builds in that is the place as such. And also, I think that is the project. I think you learn many things. I don't think that in that project, when you go there, you can identify either you are in or out. Right? So I'll say that IIM Bangalore is the place, and especially that corridor as such.
Wonderful, wonderful. Chinmay, why don't you share your favorite space by Doshi sir?
Yeah, certainly. And I have also got a very interesting story, which I even narrated, sir. We were at his home one Sunday morning. He invited us for breakfast. We were in the garden, and me along with 2-3 trainees actually. So we had this entire discussion of how amazing Kamla House was, and that is no doubt one of my very favorite buildings of his, a very domestic scale. And when everyone was talking, then simply very spontaneously, I simply narrated him, sir, for Sangath is something else. It's very magical. And I still hold it very dear to me. I mean, Sangath as Sir's creation is one of his absolute favorite of mine. I mean, the entire experience of walking into it being ambiguously hidden inside those neem trees, and the mysteries he created at every point of time in the entire experience. What he always used to talk about, architecture being experiential craft. So this is very evidently displayed in all its robustness, if I may use this word, very peculiarly in Sangath. So Sangath is my absolutely favorite building of Sir's.
Certainly, certainly. Sangath has that capacity of looking at a building obliquely, like Rajeev sir also said. Mansi, why don't you share your favorite building of Doshi sir that you suggest anybody should just go and see that?
So I think I have many favorite, but I think if I had to pick one, it would be the School of Architecture at Dept. Being a student there and spending 6 years in that building through all the various spaces, I think it's completely imbibed in me. And the experience of being an architecture student and being in that environment in that particular building really went hand in hand to make the experience what it was. I think it was, we were living and breathing that architecture and learning through it, whether it was all the different studio spaces and how we could look onto the north lawns on one side or onto the ground and the canteen on the other. I have a memory where once Professor Rajeev was on one of the studios and he was very upset with some of the models and things. And one of the students was using a regular ball pen to take notes. And I remember he took that pen and threw it out onto the ground. And this was only possible in a building like Doshi Sir's School of Architecture. And so we connected with that building at such a deep level, whether it was the ramp and what it meant to have general body meetings over there, or you would sit at the end of the ramp and you could see all the students who were coming in, the new students, the first years, you could see everyone. And just there were so many surprises. And, you kept learning through that building. We would still, I would still go back to that building and still discover more. And so that would be my favorite building. And then there were just lessons of architecture that we learned, whether it was about the North Light or, the way we created ramps, or how the canteen and the ground where we had Garba and Piraji Sagra's basement, everything was so well connected that it was really a very special place to be in. So that would be my favorite.
Wonderful, wonderful. Rajeev sir, before you share with us your favorite space designed by Doshi sir, I will also request you to please share with us some of the good books that Doshi sir would always recommend anybody, any student of architecture to read. Because when we were around Doshi sir, he would always tell us, go read this book, read this book. Please share with us your favorite space by Doshi sir, and any interesting or list good books that you would recommend us to read as concluding remarks of this panel discussion. And after that, I will ask Kamalacha to take over. Please, sir.
Mr. Doshi used to do this exercise every couple of years. He would take a sheet of paper, put down all his projects, and then he would start grading them. He would say, oh, for this house, I give myself 7. This one, then he would say for Sept, okay, I think 7. And he would do this continuously every couple of years. He would keep on sort of reviewing this. So today I did pretty well. I scored so much to discuss his grading system. And it was very interesting because he was rediscovering them again and again and again. And he would point out what he thought he had done right and what he thought could have added further to it. And so therefore he was always reviewing whatever he built from his personal. And he said, okay, now let's compare it to the mill owners. Let us compare it to this. And he would again start grading. And say, if mill owners is 100, then this has got 70 or this got 60. And he would do this exercise. So that I found a very fascinating thing that he continuously sort of did over time. The other aspect was when you say favorite place or favorite space, I don't think I have one. I have several of his buildings which I have favorite spaces. I mean, in the studio at Sangath, it's not only Sangath alone, but the studio is amazing that it's a workplace, of course. It's got wonderful light, it's got a wonderful ambience, it's got a volume, everything works very beautifully. But when you remove all the tables and put just chairs out there, it makes a great seminar hall. We've had lots of seminars out there. We've had lectures out there. And then you remove even the chairs out of there and you have a bathak and you have a music program and singers come and sing out there. And it transforms again and it works so beautifully. We have pujas out there every Diwali and again it changes. So this whole capacity of all his spaces to keep transforming, I think for different occasions, it's a great thing. It's a great place for parties. I mean, we've had weddings there, including my own. The reception was there. It's a great place to have huge parties out there, outside on the lawns, on the terrace. And it's a place where you don't know whether you're in or you're out. You don't know between ground and terrace, between ruin and place. These have all become, let's say, things that have imbibed. And in every project, I always look at this whole sequence. How do you arrive? How do you go through? When you climb up, do you really go up or are you actually coming out again? And so these are lessons that if I start looking at my projects, I say subconsciously, they're always connected back to that one building that I inhabit all the time, but it also gets regurgitated in so many ways. It never looks like Sangath, but it becomes sangath in different ways. If I look at, once we were having this discussion, Doshi and I, and he says, the three things that a building must have. I said, what are those three things? So he says, firstly, the solution must be obvious. It is the most obvious thing that you have done. You can't make a mistake out there that it's so obvious that, there was no other way that you could have done it. So whatever the problem was. Then the second thing he says, it should be exaggerated. And the third thing should be, that is enigmatic. So these are the three things that he talked about. So I'll go in reverse, actually. I've done it in reverse. So the first thing is enigmatic. When something is mysterious, is enigmatic, you can't decipher it in one go. You are intrigued and you want to find out. So you are seduced by it to discover more. The second part of it is exaggeration. Now you look at the way that, when you say exaggeration, the walls are exaggerated. The ground comes and meets the plinth. The building is sunk below, and all you see is the walls from the side. And so really that is the exaggeration of those things as elements. Now, obviously, the obvious part is that look at the way that you go in by climbing in by 3 feet and piling up by 3 feet. You've actually made a whole floor almost. And the heat, the dust, the sound, all of those he anticipated. So that's the obvious part of it. So just to give you an example of how these three things work, and I've always looked at it, let's test everything, look at these three things. Have I exaggerated something to the point that, it suddenly you say, oh, this is, wow, this has become bigger than it should have been. But that's what makes it different. So we would always talk about a pagdi, like you're wearing a pug. So you would say, Are mukut ya pag pehno to, your head grows bigger. You are royalty then. Then you are something special. And so therefore it is important that it has the crown. And that crown is the waltz. And so these kinds of discussions about how you look at the human body, how do you exaggerate certain parts of it and make it special to make it significant. He says, a Maharaja stands with a guy with him, with a chhatri to say, I am special. So you make a parasol. So you look at the High Court in Chandigarh and he says, oh, well, here's this parasol, this huge parasol. And then the building is actually quite tiny beneath it. If you look at it, there's this huge exaggeration. So he would always give these kinds of examples. And to me, those have been great learnings of how, when you look at any building, what do you exaggerate? What do you pull? What do you push? What do you make enigmatic? So the functional part is one part of it only. That, of course, you will do. You're good at that. You should not have a problem doing it. So this is the same thing I would go for his house, because my first understanding of him, well, when I first came to meet the family, I came to the house at night. And the way the garden connected to the house, the way the flooring changed at one end and became, a jumble of leftover things, of waste. The way that the stone felt as you walked on it bare feet. And the sounds you heard from the garden all the time. I look at that. And then when he did the extension, he had just finished the extension of the house at Kamla House when I first came. And I said, what a fantastic small little addition. One, it completed the court. So this house, which was in isolation, now became part of a traditional house, as if there was a court being formed. And that court, it had a basement. It connected the earth, went up, which was the library in the basement, then the guest room where I was to stay in between. And then it had this roof with these just 4 columns coming up and tying it together, which symbolized a space, an enclosure, but they didn't have an enclosure. But when you sat in that frame, you saw the stars, you saw the moon, you saw sunrise and sunset, and you said, I have a space. And so these were the kinds of lessons that I have imbibed being with him, and understood a lot of it by just observing. I think one of the things that happens is in our today's world, where we are very connected to observing everybody on the phone, or observing all the time, looking at our phones and looking at who's looking at our Instagram and the rest of it, we stopped observing actual life. And actual life is what really makes everything happen in the ways that we connect as architects. So this to me is, I could go on and on about his other buildings, but I won't. I think I will also move some.
Wonderful. I simply cannot explain, Rajeev sir, what significance your words has brought to this panel discussion. It has been so fresh to know so many things from you about your life and also Doshi sir's life. I'm extremely grateful. I would like to now ask, Kamalaja to please step in and take this forward.
You're muted, Kamalaja, you're muted.
Thank you. So I actually had a question for you, actually, Rajeev sir and Vijay sir. Doshi sir, like when the architectural fraternity and the entire nation celebrated when Doshi sir won the most acclaimed Pritzker Award and even the RIPA Award. So I wanted to ask, like you all must have been with him. So how exactly was the in-house celebration? The celebration that, and what exactly were his thoughts? How did he, take it, like being awarded with such prestigious awards, and what were his future goals, and something that inspired him or something that he would talk about? Like he was an inspiration himself, but there must have been something that, inspired him for a greater goal or something.
So the question is addressed to me or to Vijay?
Both of you, actually.
You go ahead. You go ahead, sir.
I think it's almost 10 years before, when he was in his 80s, that we thought that he would be getting the Pritzker. The Pritzker team came to Ahmedabad to see his works. And he was on the jury earlier. So was from, I think, 2007 to 2010, he was on the jury. And I think 2011 they came, or 2000 they came to Ahmedabad. So we thought that he would get the Pritzker then. And I think it would have made a huge difference at that point, perhaps, because obviously it's the most prestigious award. I think by the time it came, it didn't really matter to him about, but of course he was overjoyed and thrilled that he had been recognized. We got to know about it 3 months in advance, because when the call came, they said you cannot reveal this till the time that the official function is announced and the award is announced. So yes, there were lots of groups that I was part of it before the Pritzker was being announced, and they were all speculating. There were long lists of lots of people, and everybody was speculating, and I was silently saying, well, see what's going to happen now. No, he was overjoyed first, no question about that, and he was delighted. There was a time when Tom Pritzker and Frank Gehry had come to Ahmedabad.
Oh.
They came because they were going to Nepal, and they stopped on the way in their private jet to have a look at the mill owners. And I remember us going to the mill owners, and Gehry sat down on the steps of the auditorium upstairs, and he says, Doshi, this is the source, and you were part of it. This is the source. That building is, I think, to me, it's one of the most wonderful architectural wonders in the world.
Mm.
When he sat down there, it was also a reflection of these things. So the funny part about the mill owners is that very basic drawings were done in Paris. And then when Doshi came to supervise it, I think he took a lot of decisions, of course, complicated, including he designed the furniture. So it's very different from his buildings in terms of finish, etc., from the ones that were done in Chandigarh. The Chandigarh ones, the scale, the magnificence, it's very different. This is very small, but it is impeccably finished. Roughly finished, but impeccably finished. And I think that's the big difference. But anyways, the point I think is that you asked about the prize. And I think similarly, I think from the 60s, he got awards earlier on, the French medal and those things and all when he was 60. But from 87 onwards, but the Pritzker and the gold medal, etc., came right towards the fag end of his life. And I think they were much more reserved earlier, if you ask me.
Right. Sir, I also wanted to ask, like, since you have been associated and you know him since so many years now, and you know a side of him that not many people know, even his colleagues. So, what would have been his journey to success like, or what must have been the biggest turning point in his career? So, like some motivation, something that clicks, or something that was it like that, or was it a process, or something?
He always said that, I don't know how things happened. I mean, why did I go to Paris? Why did I go to London to do my RIB exam there? Why did I go to Paris? Why did Corbusier take me up? Why did I come back and work for him here also? And then how did I meet Vikram Sarabhai and Sheikh Kasturbhai Lalbhai? How did they become my mentors? So he believed in destiny. He says that you open yourself and destiny will take care of you. You don't have to. He never worked to get awards, or he worked towards getting clientele like that. They happen. You attract things which as you open yourself up. And I think for younger people, don't lose heart. Don't lose. Persist in what you believe in, and things will happen to you. You'll be surprised. I look at now I'm old enough to look back at my life, and I say, how did I meet him? I mean, there was by chance. No, everything happens by chance. But then if you open yourself to that chance, things transform, transcend, and you go into a different direction. So keep yourself open to everything. Don't say that for this I should get this, and this is what I deserve, or etc. Just keep doing what you believe in strongly.
Right.
Work hard for.
Yes, that is wonderful. And is there if we would end that discussion here, I would like to end it with asking one last question. I think you have answered a bit of it already, but still, were there any goals or dreams that Doshi sir had for the design community or our nation on a whole? And is there any guru mantra that he gave you that you wish to share with us all? Like something that would inspire us, or to work towards a greater goal in our own careers and in our own lives.
See, I think he always said, first of all, you have to give back to society. You are part of society. You must participate in society. You must give back to society. Whether you teach, whether you do social work, whether you do engage yourself with projects that go beyond your ken. I think all of these are important, and you must transcend them. It is your duty to be part of society and give back to society. That is one. Two, I think he always looked at this country has a huge potential, and the younger generation, every succeeding generation will push it towards that goal. It will take time, but it will happen. And I think he always was an optimist, and he believed in that strongly. So I think it's our duty to take whatever he believed in, take it further, and say the best that we can. How do we excel? How do we grow? And he would always say, tell me, does a flower know that it has to blossom? It is instinct. It opens and blossoms. And it doesn't say that, come and smell me, or admire me because of that, because of what I'm doing. It just blossoms. So all of us need to blossom to our fullest extent.
Actually, these are such wonderful metaphors. I think he was a very spiritual person, and spirituality doesn't always mean talking about the greater power, or but even his works reflected like his designs reflected on his ideologies, his philosophies, and which you just said, that work for the greater good, or the give back to the society. I think that's a very deep message, and I think that is the I think entire goal of being an architect, to give back to the society, to work for the betterment of the society. So that's actually a wonderful thought. And yeah, so I would like to conclude the panel discussion here. And if anyone from the audience has any questions, please go ahead. And I think it's a very wonderful chance to ask some of the, very, closest people who had worked with Doshi sir. So
Okay. I'll have to excuse myself now because I think my turn is going to come up.
I'm glad the entire discussion was over before you had been called. So that's actually really good.
So thank you all. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful
Thank you,
to see.
thank you. Thank you, Rajeev sir. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, sir.
An honor to have you. Right. So I think if people do not have any questions,
संपलं थांबून पब्लिक मध्ये विचारताय कोणाला काय प्रश्न विचारायचे
I think the story that Chinmay told us of his first experience with Doshi sir. So that actually made me smile because even I'm a Maharashtrian, I'm a Marathi, and I'm here we are based in Amdavad. So every time a project comes of someone from Maharashtra, I'm always like, oh, mere gaon se. Like that's actually connects with people. And I'm very glad to know, like, because of you, Chinmay, today I got to know that he also spoke Marathi. I think that's a very, really, interesting fact. So many things that, I or even, my whole team, the audience got to know because of you all. And Aman, you did a wonderful job at moderating, and the way you added your own style, your own inputs, that was really good. And
Thank you. I'm glad to know I was helpful. This was my first moderation. Thank you.
first of many, I think. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, and Mansi, your experience, I think I talked to Mansi for the first time over call, I think 2 days ago, and we had a long conversation about when she first started working with Doshi sir's autobiography, and that was enlightening. I mean, that particular I felt like I actually said to her that I wish we had connected sooner, because to be able to work on an autobiography of such a legend, I think that's a fortune in itself. And she elaborated it very well, I think.
Thank you, Kamalaja, for this. I think you did a really great job with the questions, and Aman with the moderation. I think this was, it was good to do an event like this, and especially have Rajeev sir talk about Doshi sir was really.
Yes, even Vijay sir had even he was traveling, but still, even in his busy schedule, I remember the time I had connected with him. He was traveling, he was not in town, and still he was kind enough to respond over email, over calls, over text. So I'm really glad how open you have all been, and it was like a nostalgic get together, and nostalgic and fun as well, because there were so many moments that made us laugh, made us smile. And not many of us had the privilege of meeting him in person. And so listening to your stories actually felt like, oh yeah, I think we did meet in some, and hopefully we'll meet some in some other life. But yeah, so on this note, I would like my, would like to play a small video clip. Just, yeah.
Oh, the heart is the inside core. The balcony, which we call a charuka with a jali, is your eyes. The terrace is part of your head. And the breeze that comes through the courtyard and opening is your body. So all these things become closer, and when you put them together, you save the walls, you do parallel things. You use little, whatever is available, you use all of those. And they get a proper scale. So architecture has to also have some scale, which can create dialogue. I thought I should make a myth, write a myth, so that its object takes another meaning. And that meaning came from an old Indian legend of Pithora Baba, in which in the villages, when they build a building, when they make walls, but the last wall has to be done, then they would have a ritual of a few days in which, they would sing and dance and then draw on the wall. And then there will be, in their old tradition, they would sacrifice. But when the whole ceremony is done, they think now things have come alive. So the whole idea in the world, when we do buildings, when we construct things, when we find our own ways, as I was mentioning earlier, my question is architecture alive? Or is architecture only static, silent, and aloof? Or it is an extension of our family? And not only that, but all its organs, windows, skin, body, limbs, is it really telling us another story about the functions of those similar to what we are going to do in the building? And I think this is something which I try to do. And I think to me, therefore, in the end, architecture is an extension of life. Architecture is really what nature does to the landscape, to the life of people over time, how it evolves, how it merges, how it integrates, and how it becomes quiet, beautiful, but almost eternal. As if, that it has given us a sense of being spiritual.
So, to our national treasure, dear Doshi sir, you will always be remembered, you'll always be missed, and we hope we justify and rightfully carry forward and practice your wonderful teachings and the values you imbibed in us. Even though some of us didn't have the fortune and privilege of meeting you, you touched our lives as a guru, as a guiding force in ways unthinkable. Thank you so much all for joining us today. And on this note, I would like to end today's webinar and see you in the next webinar of TADialogue series 2023 in the March edition. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Aman. Thank you, Chinmay. Thank you, Mansi. Thank you so much, Vijay sir and Rajeev sir, for taking out time.
Thank you, Kamalaja. Thank you for having me as a moderator. Thank you so much, and
thank you all, thank you
everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Vijay, Mansi, Chinmay. Wonderful connecting once again after 10 long years.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kamala.